Hey, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits, the only podcast with old friends discussing old comics with the people that created them. I'm Joe Marcello, joined as always by my partners in crime, Orrin Phillips.
How are you?
And Mike Farah.
Howdy.
So in a couple of moments, you're going to hear one of our latest and greatest, most interesting episodes. We will be speaking to Paul Kupperberg. He is someone who has had, a pretty extensive career. He has touched on or worked on just most characters that I have ever read. We're talking, most of the DC characters, Superman, Supergirl, Green Lantern, Doctor Strange. He has done it all. Specifically, though, he has been a writer and an editor. And he had a really, really interesting conversation. I was referred to as Chris Farley. It was great. So, that's how I like to remember my interview with him.
That was awesome.
I just love Kupperberg because he's a very funny guy. He's very forthcoming. And I was a big Superpowers action figures fan growing up. So when he took over those books working with Jack Kirby, I love the stories he wrote for them. And I was very interested to hear his memories from working on those books.
I really enjoyed hearing from someone that's, more of a journeyman type writer and editor, not someone necessarily that's that marquee name, but really got in there, worked with a lot of legends himself, and worked with basically all the characters that he wanted to and that we could even imagine. It was very interesting to hear a lot of his stories. I liked hearing that during Crisis, his biggest concern was not the world-ending nature of the event, but that his comics Superboy and Supergirl were going to get canceled. So, really on the level, grounded kind of guy, and great interview. So, hope you enjoy.
We are honored and pleased as punch, as they say, to have Paul Kupperberg as our guest today. His career spans like everything that I have ever read in DC. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Nice to be here. Wherever here is.
There you go.
In the Zoom world.
In the Zoom world. Scary.
Orrin, by all means, kick it off, please.
Oh, okay. My first question is, I'm going to start off with Superpowers.
I don't have any. Oh, you mean that? Yes.
This one here, next to yours. I was a big collector of the toys. I love them. I had them. So I just want to know, I know Jack Kirby, the first series was pretty much his baby, I think.
The first series was written by Joey Cavallari and drawn by Jack. The second series was written by me and drawn by Jack.
Right.
And the third series was written by me and drawn by Infantino.
Oh, Infantino, yep.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, what was it like taking the reins of the second series right after the first one came out?
Well, I mean, it was a lot of fun. The way I approached it was the closest I was going to get to writing Justice League. And if you'll notice, I structured the stories just like the classic, Justice Leagues, where you break them up into teams and they send off, they go off and do their thing and then all come together for the finale. It was a lot of fun. I got to play with all these characters who, each and every one I loved. And frankly, I didn't know Jack would be drawing the series when I wrote the scripts. It was kind of like, he did the first one and I figured, well, I'm writing this one, so it's going to go to, Vinnie Coletta.
Mm-hmm.
One day I came in and Andy shows me the pages. And, that's cool.
That had to be really cool.
Yeah.
Now, did Mr. Kirby have any insight or input as to directions that this wanted to go, or this was strictly your game and he was just...
Yeah, no, it was full script. I mean, Jack was, he drew what I wrote. Frankly, if I had known it was going to be him, I would have, opened it up a bit more to give him more space to do more of, the Kirby stuff. But yeah, it was, this was the last regular comic book thing that he drew in his career. And I hope it wasn't because of the script. But no, you know, so at this point, I don't think he wanted to bother with, you know, writing and all that stuff. It's I know drawing is tough. I've, you know, been around enough artists, but, you know, writing is, you know, blank page kind of stuff, you know, and I don't think he wanted to bother with that anymore.
That makes sense. And one thing I really liked about the books is that I felt like you gave everyone equal time. Like it wasn't just focused on, okay, Superman's going to lead the charge and everyone else is going to sort of follow his lead. Like everybody sort of got their own time. Was that something that you specifically did?
Oh, sure. Again, that was going back to the Justice League of America, you know, the structure of those old stories. You know, I grew up on the original run from the 60s because I'm old. And so, you know, that stuff is kind of burned into my brain. It's one of these instances where I've read so many of them and so many times, you know, it was just like, there's the rhythm. I know it, you know, it's, but yeah, you know, and again, there's, you know, all these great characters. Yes, Superman is my favorite, but, you know, he's followed not far behind by like Martian Manhunter,
right?
Who was, by the way, more powerful than Superman.
Thank
so why
you.
was he just a backup?
Right.
I'm just asking.
You know, you make a great point, and I always have that in the back of my head.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I don't know if you've read it, but the Darkest Night series or Blackest Night, yes.
If it was in the last 10 or 15 years, no, I have not read it.
Oh, okay. So basically, at this point, Martian Manhunter was dead, and he came back to life as like a Black Lantern zombie type thing. And he makes a point. He's trying to fight a bunch of other heroes. He's like, why doesn't anybody ever realize that I'm as strong, if not more so, than Superman? Meanwhile, he's lifting up a building and dropping it on somebody.
Yeah. But I mean, he could do everything Superman could do. Plus, he could turn invisible. He could turn intangible. He could change. You know, he was a shapeshifter.
Right.
I mean, you know, sorry, Clark, I love you, but.
And he loved Oreos. That was his
doesn't?
thing. I mean, you know, look, it's his kryptonite.
Now,
No, it's an easy character bit, is what it is. Yes.
Right. Now, when you were writing this, did Kenner ever get in touch with you and say, "Hey, we want to sort of"? No, they really didn't have much input on this.
I don't think they cared. You
Okay.
know, they knew that these were our characters, you know, DC's characters, and we were gonna, you know, we weren't gonna do wrong by them at all. So, you know, they had no reason to fear. You know, the other, you know, I've worked on 2 toy licenses. I did Superpowers, and before that, I had done Masters of the Universe.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you know, both times it was like, you know, well, actually with the Masters of the Universe, we met with the Mattel representative, and he brought in the prototypes. So we had, you know, Castle Grayskull and all the toys before they're out, and we're on the conference room floor at DC, not on the conference table, which is bigger. We're on the floor playing with these toys because that's where you play with toys. And you know, and he's given us the sketch, you know, the little bit of background they had. And I said, great. So, you know, what direction do you want me to take it? And he went, that's what you guys do. You know, okay. You know, yeah. You know, last time it was a case of you hire the experts to do what they do and leave them alone to do it. So.
Right.
Since you brought it up, I was actually going to bring up Master of the Universe a little bit later, but
I'm not
you know,
ashamed. Go ahead.
No, look, I'm not ashamed to say it. I still have my Castle Grayskull and my He-Man
No,
figures,
you should
so.
be ashamed.
Yeah, that's a sad moment.
Just a little bit, you know.
All right.
Embarrassed. Maybe embarrassed is the word. Yeah.
So, do you see the background? I'm not embarrassed.
No, I can tell.
So the comics, the Master of the Universe line that you worked on, did it have any connection to the comics that were in the packages?
I had no idea those existed.
Okay.
I'm surprised they didn't have DC source them since we were doing, you know.
Because I mean, there were, I mean, both amazing lines of comics, and you know, it's been so long, I don't remember, you know, like if they were. I just remember reading them. I didn't remember the continuity of them. It was, you know, basically He-Man fights a guy, and
I think the continuity there. I think those came out or were done before the DC stuff.
Okay.
And my understand. And I will admit, I will tell you that after writing the Masters of the Universe comic book, I never looked at it again. I never looked. I've never watched any of the cartoons. I've never read any of the follow-up comics. Because I don't care. But what was my point besides being make myself sound like a rebel?
You're such a He-Man
right.
fan,
But
apparently.
my understanding is that much of what they took to be the storyline for Masters of the Universe came from the DC series.
Oh, okay.
Again, that's my understanding. I haven't, seen it or read but my understanding is that the mini comics didn't really have any kind of, attempt at continuity or storyline.
Got it. Now, when you write and when you're done with a particular subject or topic or character, are you pretty much kind of done and move on, or
no, not always.
Okay.
Master of the Universe was just a gig.
Right.
I didn't have any affinity for the action figures or any of that stuff. And when did this come out? 1983. So I was 33 years old. 28 years old. And I was but other things, Superman and other characters that I've worked on, I followed them all the time. Some things I didn't like. It took me about 2 years to catch up with Doom Patrol after I left it, and Grant started working on it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, nothing against Grant. He had nothing. I have nothing but respect and admiration for him as a person and a talent. And I've worked with him, since then. So, but it's just like it's tough to look at, somebody crapping all over what you've done, which isn't what he did, but that's what it feels like.
No, I completely understand. Yeah.
I was going to ask one more question about Superpowers. When there are characters, I've heard that Golden Pharaoh and a couple others were created by Mattel.
By Jack.
Oh, okay.
Superpowers was essentially DC's way of finding a way to pay Jack royalties.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
It was like, all right, we've got this toy line coming up. Jack, you design them. You can draw the tie-in stuff, yada, yada, yada. And here's some income for you. Because it was, he was getting on, and DC was looking to do something nice for him. So that's why he was handed the toy. And again, he's a fabulous designer. Fabulous designer. And he's got all that experience in the cartoons and, all those characters. So, he can deliver. So, might as well.
Cool guy to work with?
Never worked with him.
Oh.
I wrote a script. I handed it to the editor. The editor handed it to the artist. The artist handed it back to the editor.
And that's that.
I met Jack once at a San Diego convention.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was it was a party for his birthday. I forget what birthday it was, but so I go over and I'm so I want to gush all over Jack Kirby, and Jack, it's great to meet you. What a privilege, what an honor. I loved it. No, it's you kids. You guys are the ones who are doing the great stuff these days. And he wouldn't let me praise him.
That's a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, he was. He was.
Do you usually have that kind of dynamic between writer and artist, where there's a bit of a separation in the hierarchy?
Back then, that was pretty much the way it was done. I mean, there were exceptions. There were, Archie Goodwin and Walt were working together on Manhunter, and these guys were collaborating on this or that. But for the most part, you turned in a script, and often I had no idea who the artist was going to be. When I was writing the Superman books, I had to kind of keep it mid-ground because I didn't know if it was going to be Kurt Swan or Gray Morrow. And if it was going to be Kurt Swan, well, he can't draw monsters or aliens for shit. So keep away from that for scripts for Kurt.
Okay.
And so so I didn't know. So you kind of keep it, in a kind of middle range.
Got it. In the since we're on the topic of Jack Kirby, I know you did Tachyon, and how is that? Because that seems like that was an addition to like the New Gods
Yeah.
world. So I don't think really anyone has really added any new characters to New Gods. How is that to be a part of something like that?
I didn't look at it that way. Originally Tachyon was a revival of the Will Payton Starman character.
Oh, all right.
I had written, that book. I was actually the last person to edit it. So, I was familiar with the character. And so I came up with this whole thing about, how he can come back and be this kind of cosmic, being. And, we turned in the proposal and they went, no, Robinson's working on something. So I went back, the editor went back and we sat down and said, well, we'll make it a new character. But since we didn't have the tie into the DCU through the Will Payton, the Starman entry, we thought, well, if, you want to go cosmic, you want to go big, let's go New Gods, So we made him kind of the avatar of the source wall.
Right. Okay.
And, Byrne picked him up and used him in New Gods. And I think Walter continued using him for a while. So, it lasted beyond the 7 issues, which was nice. But I don't think anybody's done anything with him since.
It's so I know you said you don't necessarily read anything within the past like 10, 15 years or so, but do you keep abreast of kind of the big goings on at all?
Yeah. And, knowing what's going on is why I'm not interested in reading them. It's just, in many ways, Crisis on Infinite Earths was a double-edged sword. It was a great, albeit unnecessary story, but look what it's led to. Now it's become, it's now we have one every year.
Yeah, there's always a crisis.
There's always a crisis. There's always something. There's always a nightfall or something's going on. I mean, I'm not interested in that stuff. That's not character. That's not, that's plot. That's not story.
That's why I asked you that, because I was curious your thoughts on that, because there's always something. There's always some build up to some new big event. And, granted, there are a fair amount of them that I really enjoy. Most of them I'm just so much not a fan of. But the one aspect of it in particular, why I asked is, the source wall, which is what kind of separated the realities or, universes from one another, is now gone, apparently. So everything is kind of one just homogenous, and everything counts, everything matters.
Just like,
I don't know. I mean, that's what they say.
Just like the DCU in 1983.
And there we have it. Then we had Crisis. So
I want to jump back to Crisis for a second, because you're there and you're hearing this whole thing's being pitched, and it's going to be a big event. What's going through your mind when you're hearing all the plans and ins and outs of what they want to do?
I think it was, oh shit.
Oh.
I didn't see a necessity for it. It wasn't that complicated. It wasn't what was driving fans away. So I didn't think it was necessary. Plus, it hurt me. It retconned Supergirl and Superboy out of existence. Mm-hmm. There goes 2 of my monthly books. So how happy was I? Yeah. And I enjoyed writing those. In fact, we were about to relaunch them, both the characters, in a new. We canceled Superboy and Supergirl, and they were both going to come back in something called DC Double Comics.
Okay.
And it was going to be a 48-page monthly, with a 24-page and 16-page backup, and Supergirl and Superboy would rotate, front to back each month, and with new storylines and change of artists. And Carmen Infantino was taking over Superboy, and there's a splash page floating around that's inked by Klaus Janson, So that looked pretty cool.
Right.
And then there was Ed Barretto was going to take over Supergirl with Bob Oxner inking. Both of the first issues I wrote the scripts for the first 2 issues, and both of them were penciled and lettered. Then came Crisis.
I was going to say, as a writer, how does that make you feel? Like you have these plans, you have this whole thing, like you said, it's pretty much put together, and you're ready to go, and then suddenly, everything gets dropped.
It's frustrating. It's I was enjoying writing those characters. I had finally, after a couple of years, I felt I had a good handle on them, and I thought I was going to be taking them to new interesting places, but didn't get a chance. So.
Right.
As a writer, what would you like to see more of in comics nowadays? Or less of, for that matter?
Well, I think when we say comics, we're no longer talking about just DC, Marvel, and Charlton and Gold Key, and we're talking about 900 publishers. So I'm sure there's something something out there for everybody.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of finding it. And, my friend, with Mort Todd and Roger McKenzie, for a few years, we had Charlton Neo Comics. We, took over the Charlton Comics name and just started publishing new comics. A lot of new characters, but some, public domain revivals of Charlton characters and stuff. And, even though we were actual, people with names, McKenzie, you've heard of him. I suppose I have some small reputation, probably not a good one, but as I'm showing to you guys right here. But unless you've got something backing you to market and push these things, you're only going to sell so many copies on Facebook and Twitter. So, but also, I'm not even interested in reading the old comics that I still love that much anymore. I have read comics. I started reading them about 1958, 59, and 3-4 years of reading them, so I've been doing this forever. I've got 60 years of comic books behind me. I've read a lot of them. I don't think I need to read that many more.
Nothing wows you at this point.
Well, my attention span isn't what it used to be, so I'd rather, turn my attention to reading things that I've never read before, and or rereading, great thing, books and novels and short stories and whatever that I love. The comics, not so much. I mean, it's fine. But I'm also not the target audience anymore.
Neither are we, but
Well, yeah, but you are, because you want the product. And what, you're in your 40s?
Yeah, 42.
Yeah. Okay, you are. You are the 18 to 45 demo. You are the target audience. Actually, these days more like the 24 to 45 demo. So you're it.
Then they really need to get their shit together. Pardon the expression.
Well, who's enabling them by buying the product?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, no. I understand, and I agree with you. And as a comic book fan, I certainly value your opinion in that sense, and it makes complete sense to me. Also, as a comic book fan, my one beef with, and dare I say, the big two, is that they don't create anything new. They kind of rehash the same stuff for the most part.
Because creators have gotten smart and are no longer bringing them anything new. Because anybody who can bring them something new that's going to get enough attention, they can keep it. They can own it. They don't have to give it to Marvel anymore.
Yeah.
Roy Thomas became an archaeologist and dug up all this old crap. Yes, partly because he loves it, but partly because he wasn't going to create new characters and give them to Marvel. So all right, I'll give him the vision, but it's based on something that you already had. So it's no loss to me. But there was a reason for that madness.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I wanted to go back for a second, because when you were talking about Superboy and Supergirl, You did a really, it was a great article for 13th Dimension about unpublished
Yeah.
stories that you would pitch. And I'm fascinated by it. I thought a lot of the stuff you came up with is very creative. It was a way of taking characters that might have been underutilized a bit and putting them back to the forefront, giving them a second life.
Yeah.
And I know as a writer, and also you've seen it as an editor, could you take us maybe through the pitch that you had to go through, who you spoke to about this, and what you had to present in order, to try to get these books made?
Geez, I'm trying to think of one offhand. A lot of it is just me going, "Oh, that would be good,"
Right.
and sitting down and working up the pitch, and then turning into an editor who will either be interested or not in pursuing it. There have been ones that I've written that that went through. My checkmate proposal sold good. I did a proposal for the Trickster, making him taking him out of the Flash continuity and kind of turning it. It was supposed to be me and Steven DiStefano. So imagine the tone. But but the editor, who will remain nameless just because I don't want to give that shit any more publicity than I would need to. He just kept like throwing it back at me and like fix that, twiddle that, diddle that, diddle that, and it was just it was just like busy work. And after about 7 of these revisions, it's like, you know what, screw this. I did, however, turn it into a young adult novel called Supertown, which is being published early next year. So.
Cool. Turned out. But I mean, I think like this is you. Like this is the guy who's been at it for a long time. You're putting out good stuff, and you're coming up with these ideas. And I just didn't get why there was such resistance, or they just didn't want to go with it, because obviously they know you could write. Obviously they know you can handle character and stuff like that. Why not give it a shot? Like do a mini series and then say, okay, if this does well, maybe we push it more. And
some things were just miniseries. Some
right.
things don't need to be longer than they are. I mean, I did a Green Lantern story arc for Legends of the DC Universe, and I pitched it as a 2-issue arc, because that's what I needed to tell the story. And the editor said, "Great, I'll take it, but it's got to be 3 parts." Because we need to fill the paperbacks, the trade. So,
right.
So 2 3-parters will make a trade paperback. Right. So I turned it into, I did it as a 3-part story, and the second part is really a lot of spinning my wheels in the mud, because there was no more story.
Right.
It's like,
spin.
Although it is, you can read the scripts in the Son of Unpublished Comic Books.
I ordered that.
Thank you.
But you've been on the other side of it too. As an editor, you've had people come to you with stuff. How do you handle maybe rejecting it, but not trying to dampen their creativity? Or was it just sort of like, listen, I don't want it, I don't want it?
Well, some of it was, not for me, or I don't think this will work, or, the greatest fallback was, somebody's already working on that character. But I got some great things walked into my office. I've been working with Grant Miller and Grant Morrison and Mark Miller. They're Scottish, they all look alike. And they sent me this proposal for this character called Aztec, Aztek, and it was like, okay, well, you need correct. No, it's fine. And I turned it in, and it got approved. Denny O'Neil, who was one of the senior editors at the time, his comment on it was, "This is the best proposal I've ever read." We lasted 10 issues.
Yeah. Now, was that just because the DC not pushed the book maybe as much as they could have, or there just wasn't an audience out there at the time?
Probably a little bit of both. I think we were, I don't want to. I'm not putting down the artist, because he was great and he tried his best and he was up for anything. But he just wasn't ready to take on a monthly book. And, I had an artist lined up, but he at the last minute pulled out because he was going off to create and design his own universe of comics, which never happened, of course. But, so stuff happens and things, either don't meet their potential or just maybe never had it in the first place.
Right. Are there any proposals that stick out to you that just were so off the wall that you were like, what am I reading here?
No, intending. I mean, you're talking about stuff sent to me by professionals or
Yeah.
like over the transit?
Oh, no, professionals.
No, professionals, no. I mean, they knew what they're writing for.
Right.
They understand the market. So I think most people just, kind of, and not to say, if they were going to send the off the wall stuff, they wouldn't send it to me. They send it to Karen Berger, So, I wasn't doing off the wall stuff, although I love it.
Right.
But, I was more straight superhero stuff and Judge Dredd. Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned that you worked on that I'm a big fan of is Checkmate, and I really dug that, and it it became such a such a bigger thing in the DC universe, kind of the group behind everything, running everything.
Well, my original concept was, DC doesn't have a shield.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but yeah, it's
no. Look, there's no, everything has an analog,
Yeah.
So inspiration comes from wherever, because I certainly didn't replicate Shield.
No, definitely not. But
so but yeah, that was it. It's just like, well, they need a good kick-ass, top secret organization. Although, I remember early issues of Strange Tales where the Shield strip first started running in the 60s, and there was a splash panel, and there's Fury walking through the hotel of the lobby of a hotel, and everybody's looking at him, and one of the dialogue balloons from Stan was, "Look, there goes that famous spy, Nick Fury." Isn't that counterproductive?
Yeah.
It's one of the points they made in the movie, like, covert secret organization, but they put their logo on everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it's not real, so it's allowable.
It's okay. We'll let all of this pass. It's fine.
Exactly.
DC Presents. You had a nice run on that.
Yeah.
Those just seem like fun books because every issue could be just something a little different.
Sure.
What were some of your favorite characters to write for those books? Because it was just such a revolving door, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I got to work on it wasn't necessarily the character itself that that worked in those for me in those DC Presents. It was more the way the story turned out, the way what I could come up with. One of the ones I'm proudest of is the Madame Xanadu issue, which was, I thought was a decent script to begin with, and then Julie gave it to Gray Morrow to draw, and then it became a brilliant script because Gray Morrow drew it, and you don't even read it anymore when Gray's drawing it. You're just looking at the pretty pictures. That one was good. Although, I did a Green Arrow one that I thought was a pretty weak script, but Don Newton drew it, and suddenly it was okay.
Right.
Yeah, the Green Arrow fighting pollution with arrows or something.
Greg got the punch, the boxing glove arrow for that one too. Or?
I don't know. He may have used the lung arrow to inhale all the. I don't know. I'm afraid to go back and reread some of those things.
Well, I read one recently. Let me show you the one here. I just got it. It's with,
that was fun.
And I was just like, you have Phantom Stranger, who lists Superman, doesn't really tell him what's going on, tells him you got to bring the Joker out of jail.
Right.
Superman's like, all right, if he's telling me to do it, I do it. Joker's not sure what he's in for, but he has to use the fact that the Joker's crazy helps control this other power.
Right.
And the Joker, he doesn't make a moral decision, but he decides, okay, I rather deal with Superman and these guys than have to deal with this guy going forward.
Right.
So he helps defeat him, and then, he realizes he's got to go back to jail. But just the chain of events in it, how do you come up with putting all these characters from different books together and with their voices, having it all cohesive?
Well, I was going to say I hate to sound glib, but I like nothing better. I hate to sound glib, but that's my job.
Right.
People say, where do you get your ideas? Where do your stories come from? I say, well, that's what I do. We come up with stories, and we come up with ideas and plots and, bits to do with characters. And, I don't know where it comes from, and I've always kind of been afraid to find out.
But the thing that also impressed me with a lot of these books is that things will have happened in some maybe the solo stories in the past that you'll have to, acknowledge, like footnote. But in order to write this story, like, you had to have gone back to look at some of these books and said, okay, how can I incorporate that into this and still make sense for this book and still make sense for the solo book as well?
I don't think in those days I had to go back and look at it.
Oh, really?
I think in those days I just knew that stuff. I was elbow deep in the DC universe, so I kept up with the books and what was going on because, I was writing, one of the core, not one of the core characters. Back then, Superman was important to DC Comics.
Right.
Yeah. Now I understand that they only publish Batman. Is that true?
Well, there's a lot of Batman.
A lot of Batman. Yeah.
There's a lot of Batman. Well, look, they'll go through. I remember a period where everything revolved around Superman.
Yeah. That was okay.
Everything. And it was fine after a while. Like, even though I am a huge Superman fan, but after a while you're like, look, there's other characters here. Like, can't one other character be a linchpin in this one event or something or other? But
well, again, you come to the kind of the internal logic of a story. It doesn't have to make sense in the real world. It has to make sense in the story,
right.
So it doesn't make sense that Superman isn't the linchpin of everything because he's Superman. Frankly, what does he need the rest of those guys for? He's Superman. So, if you applied real physics and logic to these guys, they wouldn't exist.
Right.
But if you pretended they did and still applied these features to them, any Flash story would be over by page 2, panel 3. Because,
what did he do? He ran.
Right.
And, the splash page is the bad guys doing whatever they're doing. The second panel of page 1 is, just a whirlwind flying through. And panel 3 is they're in jail and Flash is standing there going, ha ha. It's why I can't watch the TV show.
Right.
It's like, he turns his back for 3 seconds when he's distracted and regular people disappear from sight. You're the Flash, find them. And plus it's like Barry Allen apparently in the TV show is the stupidest human being on the face of the earth. Right? It's like he should not be allowed to order lunch, let alone decide the fate of the universe. But every time it would be, all right, Barry, we trust you. Why? He's fucked up every single time before. He's nearly destroyed. He's responsible for every screwed up thing in the going on in the universe, and they keep trusting this moron. This is why I'm going
to stop watching that show now because it's.
Well, Supergirl had the same problem,
Yeah.
She turns her back for 5 seconds and everybody disappears. It's like, Jesus, you've got superhero, X-ray vision, super speed. I think you can find him if you put your mind to it, So.
Well, see, I think this is fascinating because I want to hear the perspective. Like, you wrote these books, like you wrote a lot of the stuff that a lot of these shows are being based off of. Like, you knew these characters so well. Can you watch these shows and, separate from, your love and what you did to what's going on screen? Or is it just sort of like, no, this is not what would have happened?
What is yeet?
Why is yeet?
Gentlemen, look it up in the dictionary. Yeet is the greatest comic book anthology, independent comic book anthology on the market.
Yeet actually is defined as to hurl or move an object forcefully, or as an exclamation of enthusiasm.
And that's what the comic is. On a month-to-month basis, you get enthusiasm, you get forward motion, you get all the good stuff that the dictionary says you should get from Yeet Presents. Give them some of the artists that are coming up, Oren, or have been in Yeet.
We have great artists like Eric Luna Salazar. We've had Tom Wojciechowski do the lettering. We've had Mike Barron doing a story. We've had a lot of great people. Friends of mine, Dennis Miller, Jason Mink, Mike Jones. The list goes on and on and on. For $5 a month, you too can be part of the Yeet Army.
And you can have it all yeeted at your face.
Look for the link in our show notes to their Patreon and get your Yeet on. $5 a month. What else are you going to do with that $5? You're just going to waste it. Give it to Yeet, get some good stories, and yeet it up.
My objection isn't to, how they play the characters, because frankly, different mediums require different, so whatever, you want to make the character, okay, fine. The major difference in the characters between the comics and the TV shows and movies are the costumes. Everything else is pretty much, I mean, I hated the Barry Allen, that character in the movie.
Okay.
He was just like, no, that's not, Barry is focused. He was laser focused from, but again, do what you're going to do. My objection is to the lack of logic and the inconsistencies. The things I mentioned, the ignoring their powers to allow things, to advance the story. I see that in a regular drama, without any costumes, and I'm just as annoyed. I was watching some European detective thing. My girlfriend is British, so we watch a lot of a lot of that stuff. And the whole time I'm going, what? No cop goes in there alone. No, you wait for backup. You do this, you do that. But none of that, and it's just like I start, twitching and rolling my eyes to that stuff too. So
Fires you up.
It annoys me. If I'm investing my time and energy in watching this thing,
right,
please make an effort to make sense.
That's all you can do. One more thing with DC Comics Presents. Were you the one who was able to choose what characters you wanted in certain books? Okay. Yeah. So were there any ones that you wanted to expand on more character-wise that you didn't really get a chance to, or were you able? You think you got it?
I think I pretty much, anytime I walked into Julie's office and said, how about, Superman and Vigilante, or Superman and the Joker. And actually, I think the Joker Phantom Stranger was Julie's idea. I think that was his, his pitch to be. When you go into plot with Julie Schwartz, especially when you were new to his office, you'd sit down and he'd go, what do you got for me? And you'd start, and about 8 words in, he'd go, yeah, and then he takes, and suddenly, he's dictating the story. After he got to trust you a little, he'd let you actually pitch a story before he'd tear it apart. And then finally, he even bought scripts from me. You go, I don't quite get the Madame Xanadu script story. He said, I didn't quite, it's not quite, but yeah, go ahead, But for the most part, I'd walk in. I think the other one he pitched, he wanted to do was the one near the end with all the elastic characters.
Right.
The Plastic Man, the Elastic Four. That was it. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but otherwise, yeah, I'd go Green Arrow. Go sure,
Right.
Or sometimes I might walk in and say, how about this character? Go no, Gary Cohn's working on that one, so forget it.
Okay, so there were certain ones that might have been a little off limits because they had other projects going on.
Yeah, there were, somebody else was going to be doing a Superman Amethyst story. So, and besides, there were characters like that where, like, I don't think anybody else would have gone in and pitched a Superman Arion crossover, because Arion was my character, as opposed to Green Arrow or any of the, the kind of, you know, established DC characters. So
Right.
One question I had for you is, did you get to choose what characters you wanted to write in DC in general? Because, I mean, you've really touched them all pretty much.
it was, most of it was assignments. You know, back then there was a central office. There was an editorial coordinator. It was Paul Levitz for a while. It was Karen Berger for a while. Then it was Pat Bastian for a long time. And you'd go in, you'd turn in your script, you'd go to the coordinator, and you know, you'd pick up your check, unless it was from Schwartz. He got to distribute his own checks. Who knows why? Because he was Julie goddamn Schwartz. That's why. And then you'd go in and say, "So what do you got for me?" Or somebody would grab you in the hall and go, "I need a fill-in for, you know, the Flash," or "I need a backup." Or you'd stick your head in an editor's office and go, "You got anything? You know, you need anything?" And, "Yeah, I need a Kid Flash backup." Great, you know. So it was real kind of loose back then. It was a much smaller company. It was, you know, back when I started, there were maybe 35 people on staff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, we rented a third of the floor at 75 Rock. You know, the offices there. The bathroom's out in the hallway. You know.
Yeah.
You know, and I was a fan. Yeah, I'm not. Yes, of course I was a fan, but I was a name fan. You know, so because Levitz and I had gotten our, you know, first started showing up there when we were publishing fanzines in the early 70s. In fact, I think the first time I went up to DC was 1968 or so. They used to give weekly tours of the office on Thursday afternoons, and I went up to I did a couple of those. But you know, but by the time, you know, 1975 rolls around, I'm starting to write for the company. You know, you just kind of show up, you walk in, you wave to the receptionist. If she knew you, you were good, and you know, you just walk in and wander around. And you know, Fridays, it was like social day. Everybody would come in to drop off work and pick up checks. It used to be 2 checks a week. You get paid on Wednesday and Friday. If you turned in your work by Monday, you'd have a check on Wednesday. You turned it in by Wednesday, you'd have a check on Friday.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. You know, especially, you know, like I was 20 when I started up there. You know, and I'm a kid, and I've come from this whole life of reading this stuff, and suddenly I'm surrounded by these guys, plus all the, you know, the young guys like me, or you know, the guys who came in a few years from before me, like Chaikin and Simonson and Kaluta and Bernie Wrightson, you know. So, you know, we're all kind of just like hanging out there because it's Friday and we're waiting for checks, and the coffee's terrible, but it's free.
I wanted to ask you, because you were a fan, you did fanzine, and all of a sudden you're working there, you're a young man. What's going through your mind that now you're part of the DC comic world? You know, were you nervous? Were you just sort of like, you know, I can do this, I'm confident enough in myself?
I don't think I've thought about it. You know, it's like I was 20 years old. I made my first sale. I was still in college. I sold some stuff to Charlton in early 1975. Mm-hmm. And, you know, by the summer of that year, I was doing my first work for DC. Right. I was just in the middle of it. I didn't, you know, I think I was too stupid to stop and realize, you know, and kind of think about it. It wasn't until later that I realized, like, oh my God, I am so lucky. You know, I entered the business in 1975, like I say, which means comic books were 40 years old at the time. All right, so even the guys who created comic books, right, they were in their 60s.
Okay.
You know, and they were still around. So, you know, I'd walk in and there would be, you know, these golden age greats just, you know, hanging around, and I got to, you know, interact with them. I got to work with Julie Schwartz. To me, you know, who grew up, the thing that cemented comic books for me was Flash 121, The Flash of Two Worlds. It's when Barry Allen crosses over the bridge and, you know, breaks the barrier and winds up in Keystone City. First thing he does, he runs to a newsstand and he picks up the Keystone Gazette, and he's going, "Oh my God, I'm in, Keystone City," but the date on the newspaper is June 14th, 1961, and June 14th is my birthday.
That's pretty awesome.
And like, I didn't read that in 1961. I read it like probably about 65 or so. It was reprinted in the Flash Annual, and I saw that and was just like, because by then I already knew about the JLA, the JLA crossovers had started, and I love that stuff. And I realized that idea was born on my birthday. Like I'm, me and the multiverse have the same birthday.
Right. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, makes sense.
Yeah. But, and also something I came to later on was the comic. I did love the comics, and I love the characters, and I was devoted to, hardcore fan, learning the history and finding out everything I could. But really what was important to me at that time was the fan community. I met, I had a friend, Steve Guillory, who lived across the street from me, was the same age. We got bar mitzvah together, but which will cement the friendship,
Oh yeah.
And he read comics, but much more casual than me. And then we met Levitz in middle school.
Oh wow!
And we started. Paul knew more about fanzines and stuff than I did. My older brother was, he's a couple of years older than me, and he was, also into comics. He, as you know, became the artist Alan Kupperberg. But it was not a very congenial relationship.
Okay.
My home life was not the happiest. But I found this community. I found these fans, who we had the same interest. This was a place for me to go. Like, I practically lived at Paul Levitz's house as a kid. He lived a few blocks away from me, and it was a safe haven. And we were always, doing things and doing the fanzines and all that stuff. So, it became all these people, even the ones I didn't like. It's still like, there are people I don't like who are my Facebook friends because I knew them from the comic reader days, and it's just like, oh shit, you know what? I can't like block them. It's just I've known them forever, but it's a pain in the ass. All right, so it was really important to me. It was a place for me. It provided a safe haven for me.
So you and Paul Levitz basically got together and said, "Hey, I got an idea. How about you and I go to DC and just dominate that place?"
Paul dominated. I
you guys both just ran the joint. That was
yeah. I wasn't running the joint, believe me.
Well,
my reputation is better in retrospect than it was at the time.
I say that about Oren all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I can see why, but it was. I was a B level writer. I was a second string writer. I recognize that. That's cool. I had a good career. I did, like you say, I wrote every character. I had my hands on just about everything.
No.
The ones I cared about. The stuff I grew up with. All those guys, the classic DC characters. I met amazing people. I got to work with amazing people. So yeah, I'm not. I'm not Steve Englehart. Not everybody can be.
Oh, you're pretty damn good, Paul Kupperberg.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's nice to hear that this stuff is still remembered and remembered fondly.
Yeah.
Because at the time it's not always received fondly.
You got there's a bunch of yours stuff in there.
Thank you.
And I got a whole bunch more over there too. So trust
me. This is good. Yeah.
I want to ask you real quick because I'm kind of fascinated with Charlton Comics. Their whole way of doing business, the bowling alley, the cutting corners and stuff. So you put a story into them. What was your relationship? What was it like working with Charlton, or was it just a very small amount of time that you had something?
Yeah, it was. Well, I had made connections with Nick Cuddy through the fanzine days, so it wasn't like I was cold calling him. Right. I just I sent in did up a bunch of proposals and story ideas and a couple of scripts. And, Nick bought, actually on April 3rd, 1975 is the acceptance letter that I received. So I just passed my 46th anniversary in this wacky biz we call comics. And,
Congratulations.
thank you. And it was just kind of like, oh, that's cool. It's like, and to this day that it was a 5-page story, the first one he bought, and it was drawn by Mike Zeck, who was had been there maybe a year or so before me. And it was $5 a page for script.
Okay.
And that $25 check was really sweet.
I was gonna say, was that in Charlton Arrow or was it in one of their other books?
No, it was in Scary Tales.
Oh, Scary Tale. Okay.
Yeah. No, this is Charlton Arrow was a thing that came way later. That was, the fan things that Roger Stern and Dan I'm blanking on other names. I know there were a whole bunch of people involved. But anyway, yes, that was a fan operation.
Because a thing you notice in that 13th Dimension article that you wanted to do stuff with the Charlton characters. Like DC got the characters, like you even said, Blue Beetle was given his own time. But it seemed like DC, I don't want to say they dropped the ball, but they didn't do anything with these characters. They got them and they were good characters. And I know you want to do stuff with it. What was the hesitation on DC's part to give them new life?
I'm not really sure. I think they considered them better backup characters than stars of their own books. I think Blue Beetle was probably the first one that broke through and got his own title. Before that, they were kind of trying like the Captain Atom thing that you're referencing from that article was a serial for what was going to be called Blockbuster or Comic Cavalcade, which was going to be a weekly comic book with all the Charlton characters and Superman, because you need an anchor. Yeah,
Superman.
So so there was attempts at that. Keith Giffen was doing Peacemaker, and I did Captain Atom, and there was all everybody. There was a whole bunch of things, but I don't know what happened. Maybe no, I don't think it had anything to do with with Watchmen, because that was just
that was something
that was off camera. It didn't really matter to the
right
day-to-day stuff. But yeah, I'm not sure. I think it was probably just not a lack of confidence in the characters.
Right. So I mean, I like Ditko's The Question. I think that's a great book, and I know they took that and they did a little stuff with it. They mixed them in with a few other characters.
Yeah.
And then I think you did Peter Cannon for a while.
I was editing Peter Cannon. Yeah, Mike Collins wrote and drew that. That was one of the first books I was handed to edit when I went on staff in '91.
Right, and I liked that book because I thought it was kind of refreshing because it
was true. It was true to the original.
Right.
But it was it had a modern feel to it, and it was it was a good updating. Mike did a great job. Pete Morisi was happy with it. I spoke to him several times. He called me. In fact, the first time he called me, it was like, I answered the phone and this is Pete Morisi. And I was like, oh crap, here it comes. But he was a sweetheart. Got to meet him a couple of times, including one of the best lunches I ever had was I went with him and Dick Giordano to the Society of Illustrators for lunch. And just sat and listened to Dick and Pete talk about Charlton comics for 2 hours.
Nice.
So, it's like I didn't have to say anything. I was just like, just give me a good steak and I'll listen. I'll listen without the steak. So.
It's the craziest history for a book. I mean, two con men for the most part.
Yeah, they met
together and.
Yeah, the two guys met in jail.
Yeah.
One guy was for copyright violations, which used to be a jailable offense. And the other guy was some crooked, a lawyer who was involved in some political corruption. And Santangelo, the copyright violator, he had been publishing music lyric magazines.
Okay.
It was a huge business for, up through the 60s and 70s, Hit Parade and all those things. Magazines that actually printed the lyrics, the songs, because you couldn't go online and say, what the hell is that line, you know? But they got together in a new company, and you know, they did it above board, you know, supposedly. And they started Charlton, and they bought they had this factory in Derby, Connecticut, which is not far from here. I've been to visit. And they did everything there. It's editorial. There was, you know, Joe Gill sitting there writing stories, and there were boards, you know, artists were working there on staff or, you know, and then they had a color separation, they had a printing plant, they had trucking, you know, so it came in one end and it left on a truck in the other end. And the building also had a bowling alley.
Yes.
And it had, you know, it had a ballroom upstairs, you know, which was used for, you know, events and stuff. And these guys were, there's been for several years, two friends of mine have been trying to get this Charlton documentary off the ground. And they've done all the filming. Now they're, you know, trying to raise money for editing and you know, final stuff. But I've worked a lot with them. They were kind of inspired to do this by a panel. I did a Charlton panel at Terrificon, which was still Kineticon back then. And they heard it and thought it was, you know, Charlton Comics, what a great idea for a documentary. And so I've been involved from the start. And so you know, they've done a lot of research, and they've gone to Derby. And one of the producers went to the Historic Society in Derby and was, you know, looking around. The only thing that referenced Charlton in the Housatonic Valley, you know, Historic Society was a book about the history of Derby that printed by Charlton Publications. That was the only, you know. And so Jackie went up to the librarian and said, I'm looking for information about, you know, Charlton Publications and John Santangelo. And the woman was like, you know, yes, we know all about them. So there was, but, you know, you got to look at it. If nothing else, they were involved in newsstand distribution and interstate trucking. Now, I don't know about you, but where I come from, that was mobbed up, you know, back, New York, Chicago, you know, the magazine distribution business was literally cutthroat.
Right.
You know, there Chicago especially had turf wars, you know, with shooting. So there was something going on with these guys, you know, but I don't know how far to the bottom they've gotten to that, but
yeah, I think I saw that trailer, because I believe there's a part in it. There's a fellow who's speaking. I think he was an artist there, and he said the ceiling was leaking once. Instead of getting it fixed, they took some of the old art and used that to put on the and you're like, this Steve Ditko art.
I have heard that happening at companies like Charlton and all that,
right.
And newspaper syndicates. You know, or they would, you know, they were painting, instead of putting drop cloths when they were painting, they just scattered the art on the floor to catch the drips. You know, back in the olden days, DC would chop up the art and incinerate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Why?
Marv Wolfman and a bunch of guys who, you know, interned at DC in those early days, they saved a lot of that art. You know, they had to chop it up, but they chopped it into thirds between panel borders and, you know, smuggled it out and saved hundreds of pages of art.
Right.
But
What was the thinking behind that?
There was no thinking. It was worthless.
Yeah.
There was
But I mean,
there was no value to it.
It was taking up space.
Well, I mean,
it was
I
taking
get.
up space. It was, you know, you had to insure it. You had to do this and that and the other thing. And frankly, once you had the silver prints or the, you know, or the film, the negatives, you don't need this stuff anymore.
Right.
Yeah, no, I know. It's you know, I just saw there was an Avengers cover.
Well, agita right now thinking about that.
I just saw somebody post about a Don Heck Avengers cover that sold for $75,000. Now, back when Don was drawing the Avengers, it probably took him 3 or 4 years to earn $75,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's insane. You see what you see the prices. I mean, Jesus, had I known,
The mint, yeah.
I would have saved a lot more of the stuff that passed through my hands. But you don't know.
Yeah.
Back when, like, I bought, I had a really nice copy of Showcase #4 back in the old days when I was a kid and collecting, and I paid $10 for it, which is a lot of money, and I got it from Jack Abel, the artist Jack Abel, and when I sold it a few years later for $900, I thought, I have made the killing of the century. That is now a $45,000 book.
Wow.
But back then, it paid my rent for 3 months.
Job done, yeah.
Yeah. So can't think that way. Otherwise, madness.
Yeah. No, I just think it's awesome that you have that Charlton connection, because for me, it's hard to find people who worked with Charlton now or had some sort of dealings with them.
Yeah. Well, there's a few of us left, but yeah.
Yeah.
And, fortunately, the documentary guys got a lot of these, a few of these people before they, Denny O'Neil and Joe Sinnott and stuff. I would have paid money to sit down with Vinnie Coletta and find out, his part in that, because he was he was so deeply involved in that, their romance books and all that stuff. He did photography for their magazines and, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, it was a fascinating little company. It was a little, they didn't give a shit about quality. They didn't care what they printed. They had these printing presses that were originally built to print cereal boxes, and they adapted them to print comics and, the results. And they used the cheapest paper available. How many times do you pick up a Charlton comic and, it's off register, or the pages printed askew, or there's not even the right book under the cover, So it was just a mess. But.
And they hardly ever used a letterer. Sometimes it was almost like typewriter prints on top of the word bubbles.
It is exactly a typewriter. It was they credited to A period machine, lettered by A machine. And back to the documentary, we were doing a library event in Derby, and talking about the film and showing some clips. And we had a pretty good audience, actually. We had about 16 or 20 people show up, which, talking about a comic company that's been dead since 1985.
Right.
That ain't bad.
No.
So, but after it was all over, we took questions, and this woman stands up and says, I used to type the comic book pages, and I scared the crap out of her, because I just kind of went, "You're a machine," But it was this big. It was this a typewriter made in Italy, and it had this extra wide platen, and you could just roll the pages in, and
wow,
it was amazing. Yeah,
that just seems like the biggest pain in the ass.
Right?
I mean, wait, where's the bubble?
It saved them money.
I know, and otherwise, most guys did their own lettering.
Yeah, that's awesome.
John Byrne said that when he was doing his Charlton stuff back then, he's getting like $50 a page for the entire job, from writing to, he goes, so I just pretended I was just lettering, so that way at least I could act like I was getting $11 a page for writing instead of just $7.
Right.
So.
Well, he started with what was it, 2008? What was that?
Whaley of the Chopper Bunch.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Wow. But it's incredible, the list of talent that came through Charlton.
Sure.
And
they had no standards, so they would take a chance on anybody.
Right.
And it didn't matter. They would either, even if it was crap, they'd print it.
Right.
It didn't matter to them. I'm trying to imagine what would be a Charlton story that they go, no.
I was going to say.
But so yeah, and it was a great place to start, because they didn't pay much, but they also, the reason Steve Ditko and Tom Sutton and Pat Boyette and guys like that stayed there forever was because they just got left alone. Steve could do whatever the hell he wanted. And what mattered more to Steve Ditko than money? Being able to do whatever. I don't think money ever mattered to Steve Ditko, frankly. But it was just it was a very open place. It's just like, don't violate the code and go ahead.
Right. Well, did you ever get to that point where you were just like, I just want to be left alone and write what I want to write? Or
that's why I write novels and stuff these days.
Yeah. you hit that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's collaborative. Creation is fun,
right?
But being the final arbiter is funner.
That makes sense. Now, do you enjoy more creating your own characters, as far as comics go, creating your own characters in their own world and stuff, or were you a lot more comfortable taking on an established character and just expanding their story?
It didn't really make a difference to me. I mean, there was something good in both of them. Established characters. I got to write Superman. I got to do all those guys. Great. Wonderful. Oh, I can create stuff too. Oh, wonderful.
Right.
I did. I had Arian. I had Checkmate. I had Tachyon. Those were
World of Krypton, which was
World of Krypton. Yes, that was the first comic book miniseries. Yeah,
that was awesome.
Thank you. I feel like you're the Farley character. Remember that?
Remember that
was
time?
Awesome.
That was great.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right. I've done that too. There have been authors I've met where it's like, I really love you're great. I love your stuff. It's like, really, I should be more coherent than that.
Well, look,
I went to this thing with Neil Gaiman interviewing Michael Chabon at a local the college near here. My son went there. I should remember the name. Anyway, they were doing this thing. And, afterwards, I've met Neil before and all that. But as it turned out, Paul Levitz and a bunch of other people that I knew showed up for it as well. So we're all standing around talking, and I brought a book for Chabon to sign. I'm here with credible people.
Right.
I'm here, I know Neil, I know Paul, I know, and I'm glad that you mean Mr. Chabon to sign my book. It was very embarrassing.
Did he sign it though?
He did. He was very nice about it.
Like, I know we're supposed to be professional and we ask serious questions, but we're in this series of interviews with people that have, that we've been huge fans of.
I understand.
So I have to gush once in a while. Like, I got all this Superman stuff for a reason.
I do totally understand. I mean, again, my whole career was that, walking into, hey, you want to meet Win Mortimer? Yeah, it's like, whatever, just all these guys I grew up on whose stuff I loved. It's like you can't help but be, it's like, I was at a convention with Kurt Swan once in Kansas City years ago, back in the 80s. And a whole bunch of New York people flew out for that. And we were all on the same return flight. And Kurt started a party on the airplane. He's buying drinks and he's like, and it's not just us. It's not just the comic people. He's bringing everybody into it. And, and I'm sitting there. And not only that, but, Kurt Swan got me laid because he got the woman who I was sitting next to.
Yeah, Kurt Swan.
To give me her number. And we went out for a while. It's like, and I'm sitting there going, all right, I'm getting drunk with Kurt Swan. Not bad. And he's picking up chicks for me. This is nice.
Nice day.
But you got, and there have been other instances that have not, there was one, I will not use names, but it was at a convention in Chicago, I guess in the early 80s. And there was an artist at the bar, older gentleman, who was trying to pick up this woman at the bar who was a cop. And, she was undercover. And, it's like 2 a.m. and we're in this hotel on Michigan Avenue, and 2 a.m. Michigan Avenue, there's nothing happening, But we're in the bar, and the guy I'm with, who's with the convention, he recognizes the cop, and he goes, "Oh crap, he's going to get in trouble." So we get him, and we hustle him away from there, and he's insistent that he's got to have a woman.
Right.
So this other guy goes out into the streets at 2 a.m. to try to find a hooker for this rather well-known artist. So,
Wow. Crazy world out there.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
wacky.
like,
It's wacky.
I'm partying with
There are
guys.
there are still, there are things that there was another one. There's some New York convention that had a massage place in the lobby, a massage place, and there was one well-known Golden Age creator who probably just had a bad back. We're giving him the benefit of the doubt that he had a very bad back because he was seen coming and going from this place many times over the course of the weekend. So you're leaning over the drawing board. You just it kills you. But a lot of that stuff went on. So.
Gee whiz.
But but it did get me to the point. It's like don't meet your heroes because not only do they have clay feet, but they wear cheap shoes as well. It's not fun, sometimes. But
And you still enjoy doing the convention scene?
yeah, a few. I have no interest in going to something like New York Comic Con or San Diego anymore. Those are just just too insane. I mean, you can't do anything there. You can't move, let alone get anything done. I like now I'm saying smaller conventions.
Okay.
But we're still talking about 20 and 30,000.
Oh, yeah.
Attending as opposed to my
Yeah.
first convention in the early 70s in New York, the Phil Suling conventions. It was like we got 2,000 people, and we thought that was everybody in the world.
Right.
So.
One last thing I want to touch on is
No
I think sorry about that. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but early 90s come along and you start hearing we're going to break Batman's back and we're going to kill off Superman. Now, these are two characters that you've worked with. These are characters you cared about, you grew up reading. You're there, you're hearing this. What are you thinking about all this going on?
Well, the death of Superman was a 6-issue stunt that got blown up because it happened the story happened to break on a slow news day.
Right.
Because I remember, I literally, I don't have specific memories of specific days, but I remember that day. I think it was in November when the story broke, and suddenly we were besieged. It was like it made news around the world, and suddenly it became this big deal. And what we thought would just be like, well, maybe there'll be a little bump in sales. The Death of Superman issue sold like 7 million copies. So that was like, well, now they have to milk it.
Right.
And so it turned into this like overblown thing. They can't kill Superman. Well, we've done it 6 times before. It's no big. Like when I did the Death of Archie story in 2014.
Right.
And same thing.
Yeah.
They're killing Archie. Well, not really. We're killing this, other dimensional
version.
made up version of the made up character. But there was outrage. I was getting calls from news outlets, as far away. I talked to the press in India about this. So, it was just nuts. And the public, they hear they're killing Superman, they're killing Archie, they think they're going to die. No, they get better.
Right. Now, was that your call to kill Archie, or was that something that you were asked?
No, that was, Life with Archie was a very interesting experience. I mean, it was great. I loved working with those guys. I got to work with Victor Gorlick, who I loved, just a sweet guy, and John Silverclight, and, not Silverclight, the other, Goldwater. And I always mix up those Silver Crichton Goldwaters. But yeah, they were great. And the editors there, Alex Segura and some other guys. It was great. We'd meet every 6 months and we'd sit down and say, okay, what's the next arc? And work out stuff. And, from the start, it was, this is Archie in the real world. We want to deal with the real world. So everything, I'd come in and go, well, can I kill Miss Grundy? Yeah, sure, go ahead. Okay, and like, so it was like after that, it was like, no matter what I came in with, it was, not all the ideas were mine. The Kevin Keller marriage was an internal thing. And so was the death, it was like, we had reached, the book was coming to an end. We knew, how are we going to end it?
Right.
And, we were in one of these meetings, and again, it was just, everybody's throwing out suggestions and ideas, and somebody goes, well, we could always kill him, ha, 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 and, move on. And then about 15 minutes later, John goes, well, did somebody say we could kill him?
Wow.
Yeah, let's kill Archie. And I was like, yes, let's kill Archie, Not because I don't like Archie. I really am very fond of these characters. It was an incredible experience writing them. I walked in, I sat down, I knew them. I've been reading them all my life, even though I was handling them in a very different context than the funny teen Archie stories. I still, the characters are there. They're very well defined. Archie will do anything. The reason Archie is such a klutz and screw up is he's so anxious to help. He's always tripping over his own feet.
Right.
He's just a good guy, and he will literally take a bullet for his friend,
Yeah.
which is what he does.
Yeah.
I think Jughead was the smartest guy in town.
Mm-hmm.
He just was. He could manipulate everybody around him and fool them and make them do stuff for him and all that. Veronica was this and Betty was that. And, I just Reggie wound up being like this favorite character to write because I tried to mess with him. I didn't like Reggie as a kid growing up because he was a bully.
Right.
And, I didn't like bullies because I got bullied a lot. But when I tried to exact my revenge and turn him into a real asshole and tear him down, the character didn't let me do it. It just, I'd write it and go, that's just wrong. This isn't the reaction. So, so when a chance to kill him, talk about examining the characters, talk about, looking at who they are and, who everybody is involved with this. It was a wonderful storytelling opportunity as well as, as a stunt. But
right. And how did you handle all that? Getting the phone calls, getting the spotlight, and suddenly, you're the one whose name is being associated with.
I'm ready for my close-up.
Nice.
Oh, you know what? I'm not shy about promoting myself. You have to be. You have to be able to do that. You can't just leave it to other people. If I've got a new book out, I'm going to be a pain in the ass on social media. You're going to see that cover on my page a lot. But, that's what I've got to do. Nobody else is selling the book for me.
Right.
So this was great, and in fact, I thought it would be this okay, I've come back up here. I've got this, this, it was like, nah,
Right.
It was didn't lead to anything. It was
Right.
very disappointing, but
Makes sense. What was your, didn't do a lot, but you had a bit of a run with Marvel.
I wrote, other than a few years on Crazy Magazine writing movie parodies,
Yeah.
the only other two stories I ever did for Marvel were a Captain America fill-in,
Okay.
and an issue of Savage Sword of Conan.
Did you like, was it a different atmosphere there, or?
Yeah, it was a very different atmosphere there. I mean, I had friends up at Marvel, and so I would, I'd visit there pretty frequently, but I didn't really know a lot of people. Like a few years ago at a convention in New Jersey, one of the Meadowlands shows, Herb Trimpe was one of the guests. It was actually, he died the Monday after that convention.
Oh, wow.
And I had never met Herb before.
Right.
So this was like, I got to, sit down and have drinks with them, and, and it was a whole bunch of Marvel people who I recognized. I knew their names. They knew my name, but there wasn't that kind of crossover back then. So I spent this whole night, this whole evening, sitting there with all these Marvel people, hearing Marvel, what went on at Marvel. It was very interesting, and it was also great. I'm very happy. I'm glad I got to meet Herb, sweetheart, really a nice guy, and just it was a shock.
Yeah. Yeah, legendary. I mean, stuff he did for the Hulk and a lot of.
Oh man, his Phantom Eagle. Like the first time, you remember that Marvel superheroes, giant book they did. It was one of the. It was it was like a showcase book. It was one
Okay,
yeah. And I think one of the earliest things he did was this strip called Phantom Eagle, which was about a World War I fighter pilot.
Okay.
And it was beautiful. It was just like Herb knew his stuff.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, it was just like, yeah, this guy is wonky and different, but Jesus, look at this stuff.
Yeah,
I was a fan from day one. Yeah.
What artist do you think captured your words the best with their art?
I have been lucky. I have worked with, a lot of really good professionals. You hand Kurt Swan a script, you're okay as long as there's no monsters or aliens.
Right.
But I worked with Jesus. I worked with Carmen Infantino and Ed Barretto and Kurt Swan and even newer talents like Steve Irwin on Checkmate.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, Dennis Cowan. We did a run on Vigilante and a bunch of other. I think we did a bunch of DC Presents, and I think we did the last 2 issues of V together.
Okay.
But all these guys, it's like, wow, like this is, like I said with Kirby, with the Grey Morrow thing and on the Madame Xanadu thing, you take a mediocre script and you give it this, brilliant art, and like you're good. It's like I can rest on their laurels.
That's pretty awesome.
I've been lucky. Yeah.
You worked with a lot of big names and stuff like that. And were you able to call any shots at all as far as who you wanted to work with, or was it just people you were signed to? Okay.
It was editorial. It was the editors make the choice. Besides, I didn't know what anybody was doing. What their schedules were, and
right.
So that was above my pay grade.
Gotcha. And last question for me is, what did you enjoy more, editing or writing, or were they both pretty equal?
I ultimately enjoy writing the most because it's what I love doing, but editing is great. Editing is kind of like writing light. You get to do all the fun parts of writing without the actual work. Right. You get to work on plots and figure out story problems and all that. I'm a fairly decent story problem solver. Right. So, you spend 5 minutes on the phone working out this kink in a story. That's fun. Then if you have to actually sit down and write it, that's work. But yeah, I think writing, ultimately I did the editing because, it was a steady paycheck and a good gig. And, I'm working. I think if I had to take a day job, we're better,
Makes sense to me.
Actually, we're better with the Weekly World News, which I went to years later, but that was the best place I ever worked at. But,
oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And your books are available on Amazon?
They are available on Amazon.com. If you go to my website at paulkupperberg.com, there's a page called Crass Commercial Kupperberg, where you click on that. It shows all my current books and links to where to get them, either directly from me with signed and personalized copies or on Amazon.
So that was our interview with Paul Kupperberg. I found it very interesting. He really grabbed the comic world by storm. Him and Paul Levitz basically decided to take on DC. And how many people say they could do that? Both of them just, elevated their way right through the DC ranks, being editors and working on like every character.
And Paul has a really cool book out there. You can check it out on Amazon, just type in his name, but it's scripts he did for comic books that never got published. So it's interesting to see his ideas and where he wanted some of these books to go. They didn't, get there, but it's cool to see the mind of the writer.
Yeah, that's almost a what if type compilation. We'll look for that and put the link in the show notes. Bet you didn't think there was going to be a reference to prostitution in this interview.
No.
Little did you know. But
There should be more of that.
Yeah, you would think, right? Just part and parcel of a guy who's been in this industry for years and has literally seen it all.
Yeah.
So with that, as always, please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get podcasts. If you are listening to this, please check out our YouTube channel at Dollar Bin Bandits. We are also on Facebook and Instagram at Dollar Bin Bandits and on Twitter at DB Bandits. So we want to help this fly and get more interviews and get more momentum. So please tell your friends, please download, please subscribe, and we can get more of these interviews out into the world. Thank you all.
Later.
Peace.